Today on the show, I watched High School Musical 3 for the first time and started crying like a baby. I'm really getting into vintage sci-fi novels and I really want to talk to you about it. Plus, everyone's walking around with Apple Vision Pros and it looks ridiculous. All that and more on 20th Century Boy, the show that's banned in over 3 parallel universes. To 20th Century Boy. My name is Mike Efron, and this is the inside of my mind. Welcome to another episode of the show. Good to be back. Good to be back inside your ears. How does that feel, having me inside your ears? No, that sounds wrong. My name, of course, is Radio Mike. I start every episode of my podcast with a different name. I did Mike Efron, tribute to Zac Efron, because I'll be talking about him a little bit later. Send in your own name suggestions, by the way. Love listener interaction on this show. This is 20th Century Boy. God, it's a mouthful, the top of the show. Welcome, by the way, if you're new. This is 20th Century Boy, a podcast about me, Radio Mike, a writer and producer and content creator from Melbourne, Australia, just making his way through life. And it's the conversations you wish you were having about the stuff that no one else cares about. Bam, that's it. Slammed it. Nailed it. Thank you for listening. It's awesome doing this pod. I really enjoy it. I usually start each week now with just like a little intro about what I've been doing this week, and I've got a few things that I want to talk about. I'm first things first. I've been, for whatever reason, I talked about it on the Pat and Mike show on Patreon, but I've been obsessed with Yu-Gi-Oh! Recently. I think I talked about it on this podcast a few weeks ago. I can't even remember where I've talked about stuff. For whatever reason, I've been watching Yu-Gi-Oh! This, if you don't know, I'm sure everyone listening, all 90s and millennial kids, and Gen Zs know what it is, but it's like this TV show based on like a Japanese comic book where these kids play a card game with monsters. I talked about it a few weeks ago. You know what it is. Been watching heaps of that. And I've also every night, because I talked about it in my blog recently, subscribe to my new blog. I'm doing it fortnightly. There's a new edition coming on Friday, but link in bio. But we've become a reading couple, my partner and I, and we're reading every night before bed. Get off those phones. I'm reading. I put my phone on charge. Someone sometimes is on phone, goes onto the Kindle after that. But we're doing pretty well, I think. And I'm swapping between reading novels and reading the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, which is the comic book, Japanese comic book based on Yu-Gi-Oh! That's like, and I am just rushing to turn the page. I can't put this thing down. I wonder if these things are like designed to be addictive to kids and me. Because every chapter, I'm like, I can't go to bed. I have to know what happens at the end of this duel. I have to know what happens to Yugi in his duel with Maximilian Pegasus, the creator of the Duel Monsters game, who possesses the Millennium Eye and can see that. It doesn't actually make sense if you've watched it. And I know, if you came here for content around Yu-Gi-Oh! Great. If you didn't, which I'm sure is 99% of you, just power through. I'm gonna get onto something else soon. But like, it's really funny because they're playing this card game, and the final duel is Yugi has to battle Maximilian Pegasus. I can't believe I'm talking about this. Yugi has to battle Maximilian Pegasus, the creator of Duel Monsters. He created the card game. And he also has this eye that's called the Millennium Eye, which means he can basically see through the cards with the Millennium Eye. So he can see what you're about to do because he can see your cards in your hand, and he's predicting every move Yugi's going to do. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. And what he's done is he's put a bunch of Yugi's friends, he's put Yugi's grandfather and his archenemy Seto Kaiba, great name by the way, he's turned them into cards. So their souls are in the cards. So Yugi's fighting to release his grandfather's soul from the cards. It's insane. It would never fly in a real sport. You couldn't have like someone... It's basically performance-enhancing drugs. Funnily enough, I heard about the Did you hear about, I didn't plan to speak of this, they've been talking about the enhanced games. The enhanced games are a competitor to the Olympic Games that a bunch of rich white guys are trying to get started, which is basically a games in which performance-enhancing drugs are legal. Right? So there's genuinely a bunch of white guy investors who are trying to get this up and make it a legitimate competitor to the Olympic Games because they think it'll be more interesting. And in the trailer, like they put out like this trailer to get investors on board, and there's this guy and he's like, I'm faster than Usain Bolt, but you've never heard my name. Because he's only faster because he has performance-enhancing drugs. I don't know. That's basically what Maximilian Pegasus is doing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyway, no one cares about that unless you are of a very specific age and demographic, of which I guess you are listening to this podcast, so whatever. The other thing we've been doing, you know how most couples, like, you know, we're reading before bed, but maybe most couples, you know, you're sitting on the couch and you're like, oh, what do you want to watch? Oh, let's put on some show. Let's put on this. We're a gamer couple. We've officially become a gamer couple because we have both become obsessed with a game that has co-op. It's called Vampire Survivors on Nintendo Switch. We're obsessed. And what the reason we're obsessed with this game is, one, you can play this game for an hour and not even realize that you've spent an hour on this game because you're so absorbed in what's happening in the game, right? Two is, and this is probably the main reason, we realize, so if you're a keen listener to this podcast, probably this time last year, I talked on this podcast about how I was obsessed with an iPhone game called Survivorio, which is just this really addictive game on iPhone that, you know, plasters you with microtransactions and then you realize you can't really get far unless you start paying money, but it's fun at the start. We got addicted to that, both of us. And then I was like, we can't play this anymore. Like, this isn't okay. We simply cannot continue to waste our lives on this game. Then, I think it was shortly before we went to Europe, there was like this Nintendo announcement of a bunch of new indie games they were putting on the Switch. And one of them was Vampire Survivors. And what we realized is Vampire Survivors is Survivorio. I'm pretty sure Survivorio stole the idea off Vampire Survivors and copied it. And Vampire Survivors is just like the proper version, no microtransactions, like legitimate, like you just play the game and it's fun. And it's equally as addictive, but I don't feel as guilty playing it because it's one, not on my phone, and two, there's no microtransactions and it's not obviously a ploy to get my money, right? So now, every night, we're sitting on this couch playing Vampire Survivors for like 2 hours. We have dinner, it gets to 7, we're like, all right, let's just play some Vampire Survivors before bed. Then it's 9:30 and we're like, fuck, we've got to read. And then we read till it's crazy. Absolutely obsessed with Vampire Survivors. That's my life. My life at the moment is reading the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, reading novels, and playing Vampire Survivors in between work, of course. But everything's been going really well. I'm as always, and you might be sick of hearing me talk about this. I'm always like kind of reassessing what I want this podcast to be, what I want this podcast to sound like, because we've obviously got the Pat and Mike show on Patreon, shameless plug, patreon.com/RadioMike, which is awesome. It's growing. We're actually thinking of making it a public podcast. Stay tuned for news on that, but join the Patreon in the meantime to stay up to date with Pat and Mike. But like, you know, I'm also doing more content on YouTube. I'm doing this blog and I'm like, so what's 20th Century Boy? And the podcast has always changed with where I'm at. I do kind of want it to be like one podcast that I genuinely really, really like, and I'm not sure if it's just because I'm friends with this person or whatever, but Spearhead Sundays, which is Lewis Spears' podcast. I genuinely really like every Sunday. Lewis Spears, the comedian, just puts out a podcast where he talks shit about whatever's been going on in his life and stuff. And I really like just the no bullshit kind of conversational tone. I know he's inspired by like Bill Burr's podcast and stuff, but that's kind of what I want this to be. But still going to talk about pop culture, still going to hopefully do segments. So yeah, and again, I've talked about it a bit, but like utilizing the TCB feed to put other content, whether that's the movie club, the world tour bonuses, just to have content. Because I realize like people listen to it. Like I see the numbers and people are listening. Not everyone's listening, but people are. So it's just like, hey, here's some stuff for you to check out. Like, And I think that's cool. Speaking of segments, quick update on this. Get your brain ready, because it's Mike's big year of learning stuff. It is my big year of learning stuff, which I spoke about last week. I am still learning some... I said I wanted to learn some magic, and I have learned some sleight of hand magic. Let's fade this music down, sorry. I've been learning a bunch of sleight of hand magic, and it's really fun. And what I realize is anyone can learn how to do like kind of cool magic tricks that in just like 10 minutes on YouTube, you can just learn and then start practicing. Like I go for like big walks around the Yarra River, and I just bring a coin with me and I just practice doing these tricks. I posted a bunch on my Instagram, and then a bunch of card tricks, which are really easy as well. What you start to realize, because we all know magic isn't real, right? We all know it's not real. Something possible is happening. It's all just deception and trying to make someone think something happened that didn't actually happen. And so in their brain, it's like, oh, well, like the coin's there. And then you open your hand. It's like, well, the coin's not there. What? But like, how could the coin not be there? And then, you show them where it is. And I'm really enjoying it. Because magic is obviously this month's edition of Mike's big year of learning stuff. March is going to be, oh wait, was magic January? No, February isn't magic, but I'm still going to be learning magic. But I think I'm going to be learning how to use a barbecue. Never learned that. So that's going to be my next thing. A few things to talk about. And first and foremost is, and this like won't make sense because I just said we aren't watching anything and we're just playing Vampire Survivors. I watched High School Musical 3 and I started crying. This isn't a joke. It's not like, yeah, I started crying because it was so bad. Haha, I started crying because I had to watch it and it sucks. There's no joke here. I, a grown man, I will be 30 soon, started crying watching High School Musical 3. And I had to talk about High School Musical on this pod because such a massive pop culture moment of like the 2000s and of millennials and Gen Zs, right? Obviously, I would argue it was significantly more focused on a female demographic. Like, if you were a guy, High School Musical, you were like, oh, that's so lame, what the hell? But girls loved it back in the day. So naturally, I guess if you were a guy at high school in the 2000s, you inevitably would have seen High School Musical because like any woman that you were hanging out with would put it on and you'd watch it with them, right? So I have seen the original High School Musical and I had seen High School Musical 2, and then for whatever reason, like it stopped there for me. But I do think High School Musical, like the thing is the songs stay in your head. I swear to God I've seen High School Musical 1, but I know all of the songs. Classic, we're all in this together. Another classic, the opening song of High School Musical. Things that are stirring him. Love that, love the harmonies. Zach and Vanessa absolutely nailing it. Incredible. Love that song. Of course, classic. I remember hearing that song or seeing that when I first watched this movie in like 2005 or whenever it was and thinking it was so lame. How are they focusing on the game if they're singing a musical number? That's what I want to know. And High School Musical 3 had some incredible songs as well. I guarantee you this is the only podcast in the country, nay the world, that is talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And High School Musical in one episode, right? And I just need to talk about the cultural significance of this film because it was massive. It genuinely was massive, and the whole franchise was massive, and I think like that's why, like, through osmosis, you just picked up on it. Because, like, because Claire was like, we should watch High School Musical 3. I'm like, yeah, sure. She's like, have you seen the first two? And I'm like, yeah, I've definitely seen the first one. And then, this is my memory of the first one, the story. Is like, there's Zac Efron, Vanessa Hudgens. They meet at, like, this karaoke night. This could be wrong, but that's vaguely what I remember. They sing that Soarin' Flying song. And then they go she's new to the high school. They go to school together. They fall in love. He plays basketball and he doesn't want to do the musical because jocks don't do the musical because it's lame. So he ends up falling in love with music and with Vanessa Hudgens. And there's also Sharpay, the bad guy, the bad girl. She's got a twin sister. There's the nerdy girl with glasses who plays the piano and writes songs. And at the end of it, you find out that she's actually a good singer. I'm pretty sure that's the gist of the film. High School Musical 2, Troy Bolton, Zac Efron, goes to work at a country club that Sharpay is a member of and wants to sing with him at the end of school year or something, end of year concert. Vanessa Hudgens, I think, thinks he's cheating on her. They have a big fight. They sing a really sad song. And I think that's pretty much it. And then Zac Efron doesn't show up to the thing with Sharpay. Sharpay gets upset. I swear to God, Sharpay in High School Musical really cops it. She really, really cops it. She actually doesn't do anything wrong besides just being a little bit ditzy and a little bit of a bully, but not in the sense that she deserves to be like embarrassed on a big stage. But anyway, put that aside. High School Musical 3 senior year though. Wow. Wowee. Here's the thing, and if you know me and you listen to my stuff, you know I love overanalyzing pop culture, right? Overanalyzing the themes and, what these films are trying to say, what everything's trying to say. And here's what High School Musical 3 does so well that makes a grown man cry. It's High School Musical 3 senior year, and it's all about finality, going in a different direction, finishing up with something and accepting it. Okay? They're all going to college. They're all going in different directions. Oh, what college are you going to? I'm going here. I'm going to play basketball here. Cool. Troy Bolton and his best friend Chad, they think they're going to the same college together. Well, Troy Bolton has other plans because he wants to be closer to Gabriella, his girlfriend. Troy Bolton's dad wants him to go to his alma mater where Chad's going. Troy Bolton doesn't want to do it. It's about it captures high school so well because there are these things. I remember feeling this when I was going to uni, right? I'm going to uni and I remember not knowing what I wanted to do and being worried about making the wrong choice. And I remember asking my best friends, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm doing this. And you're like, so we hang out every day now, but next year when we're at university, we're not going to see each other every day because we're going to be at different schools. And then you start losing touch with everyone and it fucking sucks. That's what happens when you finish high school, right? And it's a big deal. Everyone starts changing a lot. Everyone goes in different directions. Everything happens really, really fast and you never know really how it's going to go. I've lost touch with so many of my high school friends. It sucks. You just start going in different directions. It's normal, but and I've been trying to rekindle some of them. But that's the thing. I not only did I find the songs really beautiful, right? But it was just really emotional. And, maybe I think in my age, I am becoming more emotional. When I was a kid, I never would have cried. And my body instinctively tries to fight the tears until they explode out of me, right? And then I'm just crying. They're singing the song at the end all happy and dancing and I'm just in tears, right? And Troy Bolton gets the nod of approval from his dad for following his heart. And he's like, thanks, Dad. Started crying. Because that's all you want as a kid is your dad to be like, I back you, man. I support you, right? I'm almost nearly crying now thinking about the movie. And again, maybe I'm just old. Maybe I am just old. And I see things in a different light. I never would have cried at High School Musical 3 if I watched it 10 years ago. No chance. Now, for some reason, the floodgates open. It's insane. We talked about what movies have made you cry a long time ago on this pod, and the TikTok clip of it still goes viral sometimes. The biggest one was the scene in the Simpsons movie where Marge Simpson tapes over the wedding tape and goes, "Tell me I'm going back to Springfield, and to prove to myself that I'm serious, sorry, I taped this over my wedding video. Goodbye, homie." Everyone's like, that scene just melts me. Never did, but I wonder if I watch it now, if it would. Right? High School Musical 3, great watch. Loved it. Right? And even at the end, when they're singing the final song, the High School Musical final song, and it's kind of like this meta thing because the curtain comes down and then the main characters are singing, but it's kind of like the actors saying goodbye because that was the final High School Musical. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Cannot believe that that I cried. And now, like, you know, now I just want to rewatch all the High School Musical. My life is crazy. My brain is so ADHD. It's just like, oh, I watch High School Musical. Now I just have to read everything about High School Musical I can find. It was good, guys. Watch High School Musical 3. I think any adult man can get a lot out of watching it. That's all I'm going to say, okay? It also made me remember back when High School Musical 3 came out, which I think was 2010, which is 14 years ago, South Park did a parody episode where all the kids at South Park are into High School Musical and they start singing at school and the main kids don't get it, like this.
Everyone is special in their own way. Special in their own way. Just spirit it out. Let it out, party people.
That episode is so great. Everyone should watch it, particularly like because the main boys, they just don't understand why High School Musical is popular. They haven't seen it. And then so they buy the DVD and they watch it and they still don't get it. And you just get this, I think this is absurdly funny. Just have a listen.
Says this DVD sold more copies than any DVD ever made. They just released part 3 in theaters and it made 80 million opening weekend.
Well, I'm out, guys. If this is what's cool now, I think I'm done. I no longer have any connection to this world. I'm gonna go home and kill myself. Goodbye, friends.
Just love the flippancy of like, yeah, I'm no longer connected to this world. I'm going to go home and kill myself. Just like, how dramatic. I think the episode's called Elementary School Musical. Really good episode. That season of South Park, which I think was maybe season 13 or something, was like that was my favorite season. It had so many great episodes. Go watch that season. Okay, a couple more things. I've been getting into vintage sci-fi novels for some reason. I've always wanted to read this book. I talked about it in my blog, new edition coming Friday. It's called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. And it's a science fiction novel that would go on to be adapted into the film Blade Runner starring Harrison Ford, which is an iconic sci-fi movie, right? All based on a book called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is a crazy title, by Philip K. Dick. Fun fact, if you're a Pokemon fan, wow, this podcast is so nerdy. The Pokemon Mareep, who is the electric sheep Pokemon, was inspired by that book. And I read this book and I thought it was incredible. And like, no surprises there. Like, it's a very well-regarded book. Blade Runner is a very well-regarded film. And if you're not familiar, like, Blade Runner and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep it's all about like it's a sci-fi future. Funnily enough, I think it's set in like the 1990s, which at the time was the future because the book was written in the 60s, where there's a few things. Like, it's a great world. Most humans or wealthy humans live on Mars. Some still live on Earth, but the Earth is not what it used to be. There's basically having a real pet animal is very rare because animals have nearly all gone extinct, but a lot of people have like android animals like electric sheep, and it's like a sign of like wealth if you have a real animal as opposed to an electric animal. The main guy, who's Harrison Ford's character, is essentially a bounty hunter or police officer who is hunting androids who like are now so advanced that they're pretty much indistinguishable from humans. And there's only a few ways that you can kind of distinguish between human and Andy, right? And essentially, like, the whole premise of this book and the film is like, what does it actually mean to be human? And that's where the title kind of comes from, because the main character, Rick Deckard, who's Harrison Ford's character, ends up like meeting an android who's a woman. Like he sleeps with her, he falls in love with her, like cheats on his wife with her in a hotel room, and then has to go and kill some of the other androids that have, that are on the right. But basically, he has to kill them because they've escaped from Mars. The androids are there basically as servants or slaves to the humans on Mars, and some of them escape and come to Earth to try and live their lives without having to be servants or slaves. And that's not allowed, so he has to go and kill them, right? And he starts being like, well, what is the difference between human and android? What is the true identity? And that's where that title comes from, like, do androids dream of electric sheep? Which I think is interesting because it's like, well, they talk like me, they look like me, they feel like me, they think like me. Like, what is the actual difference between me and them? Thought it was really interesting. And I'm pretty sure the film, which I've watched half of, admittedly, I need to watch the second half, but I've just been busy, it implies at the end that he could be an android as well, which doesn't happen in the book. But essentially, I just found it really interesting. I found those themes really interesting. And I also found those themes really relevant, even though that book was written in like the 60s and Philip K. Dick is dead, right? But he wrote that book in the 60s. I feel like it's more relevant than ever today. He was doing speculative fiction, but we are moving closer and closer to this world of like artificial intelligence and, what is real and what's not. And can artificial intelligence become conscious? If it does become conscious, is it just saying it's conscious or is it actually conscious? All these like really interesting things. So then I'm like, wow, that was a really interesting book that really got me thinking. And so then I'm like, what other books has Philip K. Dick written? And so I downloaded all of his ebooks, which I'm pretty sure you can get all of them for free because they're like so old, they just exist, right? And I read another one of his books called Counterclock World, which was another really interesting book, which is in that one sort of similar-ish, no, different themes, but speculative sci-fi, a bit more fantastical. Like, I guess the Blade Runner stuff could theoretically happen, but this one I don't think could happen, but it was still interesting. It's basically this thing happens in the world, just this phenomenon where people start waking up in their graves and coming back to life, and time is basically moving in reverse. So it's like Benjamin Button, like people are old and then grow smaller, and then as babies, they have to enter a woman's womb, and that's them like dying. And then the woman has to have sex with a man to rid the person from their body, right? It's fascinating. And basically what happens in that, and I didn't think this one was as strong, but still interesting, is this guy who's like this figurehead of this massive global religion, right, is coming back to life soon. But he's been obviously replaced since he died by someone else. And there's all this politics around who gets to have his body, because basically it's like if you dig up the body, you own that person and you can sell them to like their family or their friends. But because this guy was so popular and famous, everyone wants to own him, and there's all these politics around that. A little bit different, but interesting. So now I really want to read more. And it's just, it kind of feels cool. Sometimes they can be harder to read because they were written so long ago, but generally it's not as bad as like reading something like Frankenstein. If you've ever tried to read Frankenstein by, Mary Shelley, it's almost impossible, right? But if anyone has read any Philip K. Dick and wants to recommend them, or any just like vintage sci-fi or just interesting sci-fi, I loved it. I think I've got a lot of obsessions this week, from Yu-Gi-Oh!, Vampire Survivors, High School Musical, and Philip K. Dick. But because there was a TV series called Electric Dreams, which was like an anthology TV series based on Philip K. Dick's work that I think was made to kind of compete with Black Mirror, and I'm pretty sure it flopped. But I started watching a bunch of that because it looked really cool. But But yeah, I've just been getting super into it, and I want more recommendations for books like that if anyone has them. And that kind of leads me into what I wanted to talk about next, which was Apple Vision Pro. Because Apple Vision Pro has launched. People are using it in the wild, right? There are videos surfacing of Apple Vision Pro users on trains, on the street, doing future stuff with their hands. I talked about Vision Pro last year when the trailer came out for it. If you don't know what it is, it's basically a headset that everything pops up in your eye line and you can press but it's basically like a phone in your eyes, right? It's incredible. Go watch some stuff. And again, I remember saying at the time, like, no one's going to use this because it looks so stupid and it looks so weird. And then sure enough, you've got people walking around in America mainly using it, and they're stopping and like moving their hands, and no one else can see what you're doing, but you can see what you're doing, right? They're for sale now in Australia for $3,500. So you can get one in Australia. I don't know how good they'll be yet, but some of the things I thought were really cool in the reveal trailer and some of the marketing around it is like, you can, if you're on a plane, you can put the goggles on and like make it look like you're in space if you want to relax or something like that, or watch a movie on it and you can make the screen as big as possible and stuff like that. I am going to make a bold call on Vision Pro because I have notoriously, and if you've followed this pod for a while, you will know this, I've notoriously been inaccurate and wrong on every Apple product ever, okay? I remember the only one I ever got behind was iPods. I loved my iPod, right? I actually have been thinking lately of getting an iPod Classic and just dumping, gigabytes of music onto it. So I have just a music player that's not connected to the internet, right? But that's another story. When iPhones came out, I thought no one would ever use an iPhone. Why would you not get a Sony Ericsson or a Nokia or a Motorola, right? Next thing I know, iPhone's the biggest phone ever. When iPads came out, I thought the name was stupid, and I just thought no one is ever going to buy one of these. It's just a big phone. iPads are awesome. I use one all the time now. I remember when they launched the App Store and started calling them apps. I'm pretty sure Apple started that. And I remember seeing it on TV being like, get all your apps on the App Store. And I was like, apps? No one is ever going to call it apps. That's so try hard. Wrong again, Mike. AirPods. Or even phones without a headphone jack. Oh, no one will ever buy a phone without a headphone jack. That's what I said. I own one now. And I love not having a headphone jack. I never want to use headphones again. As in like a 3.5 millimeter jack. I don't want to use that anymore. I love my AirPods. AirPods. I was like, no one is ever going to walk around wearing these things. They look ridiculous popping out of your ears and just sitting there like that. I use AirPods all the time. I love them. Apple Watch. I said no one's ever going to spend that much money on a watch. I did. Topic for another time. I do regret it, but I did spend the money and bought an Apple Watch, okay? Everything Apple does just works. So I could sit here and say, no one is going to use the Apple Vision Pro. I think it's going to pick up. I do think it's weird that one day are we just all going to be sitting in meetings at work wearing Vision Pro? One day are we all going to be having dinner with our family and kids and be wearing Apple Vision Pro? I don't know. That to me feels really weird, but it just seems to work for Apple all the time. Really keen to know people's thoughts on this because I genuinely, I'm not going to buy one, at least for a very long time. And I think it just takes a few influential people to start using them for people to go, okay, I'll use one. But yeah, I'm really unsure about it, but I think it's going to work. I think in 10 years, it's going to be the new norm. It'll be the new iPhones. I'll probably be dead by then. Nah, I'll be 40. It's the same thing. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about, and I want to give it as little breathing room as possible, but I'm going to talk about it, is the whole Jacob Elordi drama that's happening right now in Australia. The Jacob Elordi drama that's happening is so funny to any Australian on so many levels. Random fact, Jacob Elordi went to my high school I didn't know him. I think he was like 3 or 4 years younger than me, but like he's massive now. Like he was in Euphoria. Like Euphoria, of course, Saltburn, which I talked about, has the infamous scene where the other guy licks up his jizz from the bath. It's crazy. But he's recently had an incident, I think in Sydney, in which he's sitting, minding his own business, we assume, at a pub, and a producer from the Kyle and Jackie O show, which featured us on one episode, long-term listeners will remember, Kyle and Jackie O featured me, whatever. A producer from the Kyle and Jackie O show went up to him and essentially started making bathwater references to him. I don't know the exact details of what happened. Maybe no one does. I think just started like filming him and saying something about bathwater and like, oh, hey, give us some bathwater, blah, blah, blah. Fill this up with bathwater, whatever. I think it was like, Jackie O wants some bathwater. And Jacob Elordi snapped and is now like being investigated by police for some assault. Apparently he had him by the neck, but I have no confirmed reports of that, right? But the reason I want to talk about it, but the reason I don't want to talk about it much is the same. Because I think everybody is okay with this because it was a producer from the Kyle and Jackie O show. I know that sounds really mean, but hear me out. If you're not Australian, some of you aren't Australian, like Kyle and Jackie O is just known as a really smarty show. Like it is the highest rating radio show in Australia, but most people, particularly in Melbourne, are like, how? Like who listens to it? I think like rich Sydney mums love it, but like no one in Melbourne, I think, listens to it. It's in Sydney, but it's being syndicated to Melbourne this year, which is a breakthrough in Australian radio. And people are just like, yeah, knowing Kyle and Jackie O, that guy probably just got in his face and like started annoying him and he got upset, right? Whatever happened. I don't want to give it heaps because it is, to me, the people who would be happiest about these international headlines about Jacob Elordi assaults radio producer in Sydney, Kyle and Jackie O, the people that are happiest about these headlines is Kyle and Jackie O and the radio station that runs Kyle and Jackie O's show. They are the happiest because they are getting so much publicity out of this, to the point where part of me genuinely suspects that it could have all been a publicity stunt. Like, hey man, if you do this, like, it'll be amazing for the show. Do it. This guy, I don't know who the producer is, goes and does it and causes this massive publicity, right? I don't think Jacob Elordi was in on it, but I think he maybe was at the pub, sent a photo in the group chat like, hey, Jacob Elordi's here, and then Kyle or someone is like, you have to do something, right? Makes it happen. International headlines. They would be loving this publicity so much, and that's what I hate about it. Like, I genuinely think this was a massive publicity stunt, and it's worked. They've got the publicity they wanted. Jacob Elordi looks bad, but not really, because everyone's actually like, nah, good on him. Kyle and Jackie O sucks. I have no strong opinion either way on Kyle and Jackie O, by the way, but I'm just echoing the general sentiment towards them and what I've seen online. I think it's really funny, really funny that this has happened, and especially because Kyle and Jackie O are about to start in Melbourne, massive publicity. Anyway, time to go. Let's do this. The plug. Pat and Mike every Friday on Patreon might be becoming a public pod soon. Patreon.com/RadioMike. Please support the show. If you listen every week, like, you get Pat and Mike for like $4 a month. That's $1 a week, $1 per episode. If you think it's worth $1 an episode, please. It really does help keep this running. We definitely are still operating at a loss, but here is a highlight from last week's Pat and Mike show. I'm watching the anime Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, which is... Game on! Get your game on! So in GX, it's a sort of side sequel to the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. The card game has become so big in the world that now there's schools where they learn it.
That's like today if you start like Fortnite school.
Yeah, Fortnite. Hey, what high school are you going to? My parents enrolled me at Fortnite school.
Yeah. I'm at Fortnite High.
From there, I want to plug my blog, All Filler No Killer. radiomike.substack.com. Link is in the description to this podcast. I would love for you to check it out. There'll be a new edition on Friday, which I can't wait for. And as well as that, if you want to binge me on other people's podcasts, there is a bunch of there is a playlist which I'll put in the podcast description of me guesting on other people's podcasts. And Harry Potter and the Boys will be soon. I hung out with Sam earlier this week to work on some stuff for his comedy show, which was actually really fun. Like, I'm contributing a bit to his Comedy Fest show, which is awesome. Harry Potter and the Boys will be back soon. We're just chilling. And aside from that, I think that's basically it. Join the Discord, follow me on socials, whatever. My name's been Radio Mike. This has been The Inside of Your Mind. Catch you later.